going to be discussing some engagement that we are setting up with the CTIA, which is the nonprofit industry group that represents communication service providers, who we all have to interact with, I think, quite a bit as we send text messages. So this is a proposal that has been worked on, as I mentioned at the top, by Benefits Data Trust, Code for America, the Consumer Law Center, others probably, that will hopefully kind of cure this issue. So I'm just going to set us up with what the problem is, and then I'll hand it over to Danny to talk a little bit about the solution here. So we've heard from folks across government that despite the FCC ruling in this past year in particular, that state and federal agencies are not required to uphold TCPA consent requirements, so that we are not beholden to collecting consent. We've also heard, or the FCC has continued to reaffirm that when a person provides their telephone number to an entity, that is considered previously in prior express consent. So meaning that even if you're not a state and local government and you've collected a phone number on a benefits application, that is considered consent. So these are two things that we have really kind of been following with the FCC and think we have enough clarity on. But outside of that, as folks are trying to set up services with vendors and wireless carriers, there still seems to be a misalignment in what consent protocols are actually required. And so that kind of the bottom line here is that service providers are asking governments to follow their terms of service, which might mean collecting more consent that is not required from the FCC. So we are kind of trying to put together a proposal that we will present to the FCC to kind of begin conversations about what we're calling kind of a government sender protocol, which we've been thinking through in a little bit of a criteria. And maybe I'll hand this over to Danny, since this is really your work and I'm just here to set up the kind of how we got here.
Well, and thank you so much for setting that up very efficiently and clearly. I think in light of the plain language presentation, the most plain language version of this is that we know that sometimes it can take months of back and forth negotiation with wireless service providers for government senders to get consent language in their applications that allows them to start sending text messages or to get set up with a short code. And so what this solution is aimed at is trying to remove that barrier for government senders, who are known entities who are, at least in the case of state and federal actors, subject to different rules from other senders, and in all cases likely already have consent simply by receiving a phone number on a benefits application to text somebody about their benefits case. So in looking for a solution to this problem, we decided that it would be really a critical step to just approach CTIA to see about changing their industry standard protocol to allow for the special use case of a government sender with particular clarifications that will make it easier, we hope, for government senders to get set up much more quickly to send text messages and to initiate texting campaigns with the carriers and wireless service providers that they interact with. Our criteria involved a couple of key considerations. One was ensuring that we were prioritizing the rights and preferences of text message recipients. So we're not proposing carte blanche to text people regardless of their preferences. There still needs to be the same opt-out consideration that applies to all text messages sent in an automated fashion. We want to make sure that consumers have access to critical, timely information about their benefits case, but that if they, for whatever reason, decide they don't want these messages, they're able to securely and reliably refuse future messages and disenroll from that texting campaign. We also want to make sure that we're minimizing the exposure of benefits participants to scam messages that would endanger them or that would erode trust in government. We wanted to make sure that our definition of government sender incorporated the full variety of use cases that are relevant to the benefits context. And I want to stress that what we're proposing to CTIA is specific to benefits use cases. So despite current TCPA language, we want to make sure that this proposal doesn't just rely on the exemption that federal and state senders enjoy, but that it incorporates local government messaging as well, to ensure that, for example, a county-administered SNAP or Medicaid program is able to contact their participants with the same flexibility and reliability as a state-operated program. We also wanted to make sure that what we were doing was not proposing radical departures from existing guidance, but providing clarifications of where, by federal law, state, county, and federal senders who were communicating about benefits are likely already in the clear, or are already in the clear to send messages on the basis of consent they've collected, and just making sure that CTIA's guidance aligns with what federal law requires. And then finally, due to the importance of shortcodes from our research in establishing trust and allowing sufficient throughput to rapidly text program participants in times when rapid texting is needed, we wanted to make sure that this protocol was not only about text message campaigns, but also incorporated shortcode applications as well, to solve that bottleneck in the process. So here's what the protocol looks like. And our aim presenting this here and in some further follow-up is going to be to get feedback from states and other stakeholders about this proposal. Specifically, if there's anything that you think should be included in a protocol proposal that we should consider, we would love to hear it, both in the Q&A today, and then later on, if there's an idea or a concern that you realize afterwards. So we'll be sure to pass along contact information as well. But here is the proposal that we're starting with. So the proposal clarifies that a phone number, when a person on their benefits application, either online or via paper, includes their phone number, that constitutes prior express consent to get communications about their application and their benefits. This is in line with established FCC rulings, but currently CTIA protocols tend to go beyond this in requiring much more and more specific consent language in the application itself before they'll either provision a short code or allow a campaign to begin. Secondly, the protocol includes the proposal that service providers shouldn't require government senders to go beyond just this limited collection of a phone number in order to send text messages. Governments may want to go beyond the requirement to just have a phone number field as a best practice for receiving consent, but that can be a recommendation, but not a requirement. We also want to make sure that the existing privacy policies and information already on agency websites and application forms are just to be considered. And this is language from the CTIA policy and practices document, referenced in and accessible from the initial call to action. Essentially, what this means is if you already have a privacy policy on your state benefits website, you don't have to write a new one or modify it to conform with what a service provider generally requires of other senders. We wanted to clarify as well that when you're sending a text message to a participant about their benefits case, that's an informational message, even when that message includes something like the messages that we saw at the first half of this presentation, prompting them to submit a renewal form or something of that nature. This is to distinguish these messages from telemarketing, which is a meaningful distinction in this context. However, we are excluding any messages that encourage the purchase or a rental of property, goods, or services. I'm not sure how many government senders are sending those messages, but we think it's important to maintain that distinction. And also, we want to exclude messages that are oriented towards facilitating government debt collection. This is particularly important because in some cases, the government debt collection agency is not the same as the agency for which a person provided their contact information on a benefits application. I'm noting the point in the comment about surplus property auctions. So I appreciate that correction and that interesting tidbit. Finally, we're emphasizing in the protocol that government senders, just like any other sender, should continue to follow the principles and best practices that CTIA propagates outside of these modifications, and that there's nothing in this protocol that would prohibit a government sender from, for example, more explicitly collecting consent to be messaged and explaining what a messaging campaign might look like on their application. It's merely to say that that's not required to start texting folks.